It's Friday, but the mojo has to improve in chat, or there's going to be a record number of people headed to timeout today. I'm JTHayes. It is the NBA Hardwood show. You know what to do. Go ahead, hit the like button, subscribe. We're working towards 20,000 subscribers here. Just a couple more to go, maybe like 4,400. But go ahead, help us out and do that. And of course, as always, if you're not already a member, use code JTHayes15. It's the only code that works. 15% off of your first month's payment. And C-Dome, we missed you last week. You had an epic weekend in Vegas, but it's good to have you back. What's going on this Friday night?
Yeah, man. Last week was unexpected, yet very fun. Roulette was probably at the table for like 12 hours straight. Had a blast. I saw you guys had a blast though too. So glad everyone had a great weekend. And yeah, man, back to the streets of DFS.
Awesome. Excellent to have you back. As I said, Sweet Travis, good to see you again. We were here yesterday. It was some hits. Obviously, Big T's play of the day. Fantastic. Brandon Ingram at low ownership just went absolutely nuclear on the pathetic Charlotte Hornets. Some misses on the other side. Karis LeVert, I think I went back to the well one too many times. And then the Knicks simply just didn't really bother to show up in Orlando last night for the most part. So a little bit tough for Fultz to get there at that price when the game was well out of hand. And our guy Nape is in chat, Sweet Travis. He says he tested positive for COVID today. So Nape, I hope you're feeling better. But Travis, I really didn't know that they still made those tests and that people still took them. So how are you doing on this Friday? Any words of encouragement for our guy Nate in the chat?
You had me thinking it was Nades for a second, because then we'd all have to be on watch. We'd all have to sit in our house for a week, and seclude ourselves. But actually, no, we don't do that anymore. But hopefully you feel well, though. Hopefully you're doing better. We got a big DFS slate today. Yesterday was a bit of a dud for me. Also, Quentin Grimes. I didn't expect the 25 to 30% on Quentin Grimes to have the 3.4K at 50 spot.
50. No big deal.
Wasn't on my bingo card last night. It is what it is. But we have a huge 10-game slate. This is not the night to really be going out all night. You're going to be stuck at your computer at least till about 8:30. You'll be stuck at your computer tonight. So overall, pretty good DFS slate. Should be a lot of fun. And excited to get the Eiffel Tower play of the day from you, JTHayes, because we need to bounce back. You and I, we got to be better for the people. But you know what, JT? They struggled to get the likes there. You know what? When they actually push it home, it helps us too, right? We're uncertain if we're going to give the play, right? We're not as dialed in. We need those likes just to be pushed early on and keep this momentum going into this slate.
Yeah, it gets our focus elsewhere. And I mean, we're at 100 right now, which is good. It's not the quickest 100 ever, but we only have 212 watching. So that's good. The mojo is picking up. People are talking about the test there. Our guy Tyler wondering if it's 2020 again. But look, all seriousness, we hope you feel better. And if you're in chat, maybe tell Nate some home remedies that he could take to make himself feel better a little bit more quickly. We'll get that going. Butto Jenkins, no surprise, stroking to Big T. Always love to see him in chat. But we'll go ahead and get started because, like you mentioned, it's a big 10-game slate. And listen, it's March. It's NBA. It's NBA in March. The Spurs, the Pistons, the Hornets, the Blazers, with some midday news, look like they might be throwing in the towel. So a lot to unpack here. There's going to be a ton of value, but there's also a bunch of teams that absolutely have to win. Indiana, still on the bubble, still on the cusp here. They can get in. They have to win. Washington, outside shot. They have to win. Toronto, Dallas, Utah, Golden State, Chicago has to win. Phoenix can slip very far if they don't stay on pace. And, of course, Oklahoma City and the Lakers, an interesting game there with the news midday that Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is questionable. And then Poku is back in our lives. Probably not on this slate, someone to consider because we know that there is likely some type of minutes restriction, or maybe not if he was playing in the G League. But we'll get to it. All of that, the first game here, starting off the slate with a beauty, Sweet Travis, the Spurs at the Washington Wizards. Washington favored by 8, a 228 over under. Guys, take a seat while I read the San Antonio injury report. Kem Birch is out. Romeo Langford is out. Jeremy Sochan is out. Zach Collins and Devin Vassell are questionable. Devontae Graham, Keldon Johnson, Trey Jones, Doug McDermott, they are going to play. Bradley Beal and Kyle Kuzma remain out for Washington, which, Travis, has to have us interested in some of these pieces on the Wizards in what has been over the course of most of the season, but in particular, as they've started to really fully embrace the tank, one of the absolute best spots in NBA DFS.
Yeah, I mean, it's a spot that we're going to be interested in tonight. The Spurs were not going to be as interested, in my opinion, right? I understand some of these guys could be sitting, right? You can make the case that the Spurs could be shorthanded. But as you like to say, JTHayes, are we really playing the Spurs in a 10-game slate? Like, do we really need to? I just don't think we need to. Now, I understand some of them could
not in the best of times. Not in the best of times do we want to play the Spurs on a 10-game slate.
Yeah, so I'm going to hard pass on the Spurs. I can't hard pass on Washington, right? But one of the big debates on this slate is going to be, how do you compare the Washington value versus other values that we might not be able to see, or other values later on when we have to make starting lineup adjustments, right? Like, you can make a case that with Nurkic questionable, Dame questionable, they're both going to possibly sit. If they both sit, JT, there's some really good plays on the Blazers side. Now, some of their prices have gone up, but do you think they're better than the Washington plays? Do you think that maybe the Hornets are going to be better plays? Do you value the flexibility to change your lineup based on the starting lineup, right? These are going to be really, really, really important pieces of news that we have to work on here. So Washington is going to be a side that I'm definitely interested in. I'm going to like Kristaps Porzingis as a spend at 8,900. I think he makes a lot of sense here. You get him at the center and power forward spot. Big men against the Spurs have absolutely dominated. Think he's a really good spend up option here. One counterpoint, you might not have the Harden news, right? That's a big thing. And if Harden does sit, well, then maybe you're going to struggle because you spent salary or you use the roster spot on a position where you can't get Joel Embiid. Yes, we'll have a lot of value today, so you might be able to get both. But point I'm getting at is Porzingis is a big decision point early on if you want to use that as one of your spend ups at 8,900. Then you have Denny Avdia at 6K. Denny Avdia is a small forward, power forward eligible player at that 6K range. And 6K is definitely going to be a pretty decent tag for him. Actually, I don't think it's 6K. I'm on the wrong setup here. It is, I think Porzingis is not 8.9. He's 9.1. So my apologies on that number. And then Denny is, what is it, JT? Do you have it in front of you? I'm pulling it now.
I don't have it in front of me. See them? You have Denny's price.
It's 5.9. Yeah. So 5.9, which again,
it's the same. Yeah.
Pretty much similar. I had the wrong tab for everything I was looking at on my end, but now we're good. We're on the DraftKings setup. So 5.9 for Denny Avdia. I think Denny is a really good play here. But to be fair, even though it's a great matchup for Denny Avdia, I could see him go for 40 DK points. I could see him go for 25 DK points. Like, there's so many different routes that I think it could go for Denny Avdia that personally, I don't know what I'm going to do with him. I could see myself passing. I could see myself playing him. I think in MME, I'll have probably even with the field is what I'm going to try to get to. I'm MMEing more tonight, so that's kind of my takeaway on how I'm handling Denny Avdia here. Monte Morris is 4.9, and we saw Monte Morris in a revenge game the other day absolutely dud, right? I mean, he was playing Denver. It seemed like a really good spot, and then people locked in to Monte Morris at 50% owned, and then all this value emerged on the Raptors, and then JSU went and shipped for $100,000, right? I do think Monte Morris is a good play. I think it's a good matchup, but one of the key things here is that Monte Morris is going to be a good play, but how do you rate him versus the other plays later on? He would probably be maybe third or even fourth in line to someone like Daniel Gafford here at 4.7K. The key is, how do you handle the center position, right? You can only play two centers, so he can only slide into two center spots. For me, I think I would lean Denny Avdia is the best value because of his small forward, power forward eligibility, and I think he gets run in blowout or not blowout. Then I'd rank Monte Morris, probably Daniel Gafford number 2, and then Monte Morris number 3. And then I think Porzingis is a good spend. It just depends on how you rate him versus some of these other spend up options that we'll get to and discuss. He's going to be popular, so you can make a case that you could fade him based on ownership and go to a guy who's 5%. I mean, it's a 10-game slate. You know how many studs we're going to have that are just going to be low owned here? So I think Porzingis is a good play. I like him, but I don't know how much I'm going to get. I think he's another guy I might just go even with the field. I do think there is going to be some value in listening to some of the information we get leading up to lock and then making a decision 15 minutes before and saying, do I wait on some of these questionable tags that I've seen? Because again, lots of news is going to be flying as we get closer. You might even have some other value that could open up and say, let me take a gamble Hope Washington blows them out a bit. And none of these guys really have this massive ceiling game, and other values open up. So the way I handle Washington, again, I talked about the plays and which ones I like, and they're all good plays, but it's going to depend on what other pieces of news I get in a little bit, because again, there's a lot of pieces that could fall. Kelly Oubre, I know, Terry Rozier, they're doubtful. We won't have that Charlotte starting lineup till probably around 8 o'clock. We got DeRozan, who's out. And we have a lot of different pieces of news. The Raptors news is going to come around 7:30 p.m. Eastern. And it could be somebody the other night. Yes, these plays are good, but if all those Raptors sit, you're going to have a lot of value opening up on the Raptors side of the ball. So those are the Washington plays I like, but it's going to be hinging on how these other pieces of news fall as we lead up to lock.
Yeah, the slate looks like it shapes up as a purely stars and scrubs slate here, which obviously Porzingis is in the middle there. He's in that mid-range. And you bring up Monty Morris. Listen, important to note, Washington still has 4 guards. You've got Morris, you've got Wright, you've got Goodwin, you've got Kendrick Nunn that gets minutes in there. So where's the upside on a 10-game slate is important to check out. C-Dome, before you get to this game, the Spurs and Washington, our guy Tyler says, looks like you may or may not have moved 10 kilos before the show. You don't have to answer that question because obviously we don't want you to incriminate yourself, but I just want you to see what Tyler is saying there if you want to respond to him later on in the show. Thoughts on Washington and San Antonio?
I love Tyler. He's a funny guy. I don't know if it's the shirt or the fresh cut. I mean, this is just a Nike polo. I mean, I came from the golf course, so it's just a normal Nike little golf polo. But Porzingis is a great play. A great matchup, a great situation for him. I mean, alone he has a 30% usage rate. Without Beal, I mean, it increases significantly. Right now I got him for about 33, 34 minutes. He's averaging 1.28 fantasy points per minute. If he's there, he can easily exceed this expectation that Mangone was talking about. I mean, he's 9K, he's dual eligible. I don't mind it. I really don't. And he can excel greatly against this team that plays no defense whatsoever. You mentioned Jordan Goodwin. He's kind of interesting if it's a blowout. Right now, he's geared for 20 minutes maybe. But I mean, if he does get 24, 25 minutes and it's a blowout, he's 3,800. He's dual eligible. If you're looking for a value play, he, brings some potential upside tonight, in this type of situation. I don't mind 2 Spurs though. Zach Collins, great matchup for him. If he's playing 30 minutes, he averages the same fantasy points per minute as Porzingis. He has the best value in this game in regards to his price on a point per dollar basis and his projection. He has a lot of upside. I don't think many people will go to Spurs tonight, but I will say that if he does get the 30 minutes, it is somewhat interesting. So I think you can consider him. And I think we're talking about a GDP perspective. So if you're playing 20, 150 lineups, don't mind it whatsoever. I don't mind Devin Vassell either. He's 6,500. Both of these 2 stand out for me from the Spurs side. Only shooting guard eligible, but he's going to play heavy minutes. It's not the worst matchup for him. He has significant value as well. I saw someone talk about Bates D up in the chat. I think his price is just a little bit too high now for me at 5K. If he was in that high 3K range, I think maybe we can talk about him a little more. And then Denny. Denny, I feel with these guys off the floor, Kuzma and Beal, you have to consider him. He does it all, right? He can rebound, he can assist, he can shoot threes. I think it was one of the games, either the last game or the game before. He had almost 30 DK points in the first half and then just kind of completely fizzled out. But that's just the type of guy that you can get from him when it comes to the production. So he's small forward, power forward eligible. I don't mind it whatsoever. It's a great matchup. Like I said, the Spurs team plays no defense. So you can pick your spots. Probably people will go Monte Morris. I think I want to go elsewhere though at the point guard position, but that's kind of where I'm at for this game to kick it off.
Yeah, Denny Avdia really good in the first half against the Nuggets, and then the Nuggets really took over in that second half, shut him down, forced the ball elsewhere, and it just did not work out for the Wizards. Important to note here also that Collins and Vassell are still questionable. We know we're not going to get that news until 6:30, I think, is when I would expect it. So we'll have it before that game, but just never know. It might be a night where you get Sandro, even though he's priced up, a guy who's going to play 30 minutes. So there's going to be a ton of different value that opens up here. We'll move on to the next game. It is much more important for Indiana than it is for Boston, who seems to be pretty much locked into that 2 seed there in the East. Indiana at Boston. Boston favored by 11.5. The Pacers, they've been playing hard. They've been playing hard, making a push to try and get into the playoffs, even as Tyrese Halliburton has been injured. Both he and Chris Duarte are questionable this evening. Peyton Pritchard is going to miss some more time. He is doubtful. And Jaylen Brown is in for this game. Cito, we'll stay with you. Indiana at Boston.
Yeah, it's a big spread, man. I mean, 12-point favorites, but a high total, right? One of the highest on the slate, if I'm not mistaken, at 236. So when you look at this, there's a lot of pieces that you could go to. I mean, Tatum and Brown stand out by far. If Halliburton plays, I think so too. If Halliburton plays, and with these playoff implications, Halliburton's averaging 1.5 fantasy points per minute right now. Obviously, we talked about the playoff scenarios. If he's playing a heavy dosage of minutes at 9,400, can be a great play. Can have tremendous upside here. When I look at other pieces in this game, GBP perspective, I'm considering Al Horford, dual eligible, 30 minutes, great value on a point per dollar basis for his projection and kind of where he's at in this matchup. And then also Marcus Smart's 5,500. He's going to play 33, 34 minutes. Great projection. Don't mind the value for him. Derek White, the same thing. These guards from Boston kind of all are in these like little pocket of upper 5, lower 6K where you can mix and match if you want. So I'm totally okay with them. Like I said, it's a high total. So the expectation of players performing and fantasy implications here, they're good. The question is can it be competitive? I think if Halliburton plays, absolutely. I'm not too worried about Duarte and his status, but if Halliburton plays, I think this game can relatively stay somewhat competitive. But if he doesn't play, it kind of really puts into consideration, okay, if this is a blowout, maybe these guys don't get a full run. That can also, affect into each other in regards to the minutes and, if no one plays the fourth quarter. So I will say, though, if it is technically going towards a blowout, one guy I would consider is probably how I've seen the rotation. I've talked about this before. Miles Turner not getting like that full dosage of minutes. You see Isaiah Jackson come in, Brissett. These are cheap guys, but they're playing great minutes and they're performing off the bench. You could even consider Jalen Smith if you wanted to too. So just from the style of play of how I've seen Indiana, it kind of puts into consideration of, these guys do have the upside to go off someone explosive like Jalen Smith who can attack the rim, who can rebound. Same thing for Jackson. Jackson's been great off the bench as well. So these are bigs that you can, somewhat consider if you're looking to pay up and spend elsewhere. I don't mind it whatsoever. But like I said, second highest total on the slate. You would have to think that there could be some potential fantasy production here. And then the last guy that we can go over is Robert Williams. He's 4,600. He could excel here in this matchup. They struggle against bigs. The question is how many minutes do you have him projected for in this type of situation? So he was injured or he was not in the lineup for quite a few games. So I think the status would be if you have him projected for 23, 25 minutes, 4,600, he can excel here. So that's pretty much it for me.
Travis, Indiana at Boston.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have a lot to say, so I don't think I have a lot to say, JT. I'll tell you that. Like the Pacers side of the ball is just, it's tough. I think the issue you're going to run into here with the Pacers is like, it's a slate with some really good value. And like, I believe Halliburton doesn't play. The question is, does Duarte not play? And if Duarte doesn't play, what is the starting lineup? Are they going to randomly go Shea Brissett? They sometimes do some weird stuff with their lineup. So overall, I just don't think the Pacers, they're not priorities. You can make the case that some of these guys that slide in the starting lineup, like does Miles Turner have a ceiling at 6'6"? Yeah, he has a ceiling. But again, we don't have to talk about every single play. This is a better fade spot for me. I think I'm out on the Pacers and the Celtics. The problem here is you really like targeting the Pacers, right? If you had to make a list of DFS teams that you target on almost any slate, the Pacers are one of them. Projections always pop up guys, but why are they not popping up? One reason why is the Celtics have gotten healthier. That's one reason. You could make the case that Robert Williams at 4.6K, that is a cheap price tag for him. But with the way the Celtics are and how crowded they are and how they're focusing on the playoffs, are they running Robert Williams into the ground for 30-plus minutes tonight? Probably not. Doesn't seem too necessary there. Marcus Smart has a cheap tag at 5'5", but again, are they going to run him into the ground? It just doesn't seem like a necessary spot to play these Celtics. The only Celtic I'm sort of kind of considering is Jason Tatum. And it's mainly because if you have good values at the center and guard position, well, at some point you have to spend up for a forward, right? And you can make a case that Jason Tatum is a good raw point spend on this slate. So Jason Tatum, I think, is in the conversation as a contrarian spend in this game, but that's really it from this one. I don't have any interest in any players from this game. And again, it's a 10-game slate. Some games we're going to move a little bit faster from, and some we're going to talk a lot about.
Yeah, Rick Carlisle with a almost full rotation is almost always a hard pass. And Brissett started the last game, but 17 fantasy points is not going to do it on a slate like this. So I think it's more of a guessing game on the Indiana side with the big men. And like you said, there's a lot of other teams that are much less healthy than the Celtics are, with Robert Williams coming back. It's only his second game back. So could definitely take a shot on him because of how bad the Pacers have been against big men. But we'll go ahead and move on to the next game. The Pistons. Don't we love to have the Pistons? This is their 187th game this season. They are playing at Toronto. Toronto favored by 14.5. 224 implied total for the Pistons. Bogdanovich, Alec Burks remain out. Corey Joseph is out. Rodney Magruder is out. Eugene Omoruyi has signed a contract. Jalen Duren and Isaiah Livers are in. You hinted at this, Travis, on the Toronto side. We have some news to come. Precious Achiuwa, Scotty Barnes, Gary Trent, and Joe Wieskamp are all questionable. Delano Banton remains out. Thoughts here, Detroit at Toronto.
Yeah, so this Toronto news is pretty big, and I could see it going the way where it's only some of these pieces and not all of them, right? It could be Scotty's in and Trent's out, and I don't know which way it's going to go, but I could see it going either all in, all out, or just either way. I don't have any strong read on which way it's going to go, but you can make the argument that if they do all sit, well, there's some really good plays that are going to pop up. If you remember, Chris Boucher, he was 60% on the other slate. I know every slate is different, but pretty much proves he's a good play in that spot. Yes, it was a shorter slate, but Chris Boucher, I mean, in this role at 4.5K against the Detroit Pistons, I mean, how do we not have interest in that, right? Also gets the opportunity to maybe have some mop-up duty. Like, it's just a great spot for Chris Boucher at 4.5. I would have some interest in him. If you have all these guys sitting, I think Fred VanVleet at 8.7, really good play. I think Pascal Siakam at 9.3. It's a little bit of a tougher roster, but it is Detroit. I think it's fine. I'd much prefer Jakob Poeltl. He would be my favorite guy in this game, with or without injury news. Just at 7.2K, he's been absolutely crushing. The debate you can have is it worth making that option when you have a lot of really good center spends today that you can make a case for? I mean, you got Joel Embiid possibly without Harden. You got Giannis without Middleton. You got Anthony Davis, possibly without D'Angelo Russell. You got Domantas Sabonis in a big game against the Suns tonight. You got Walker Kessler without Lauri Markkanen. You got Daniel Gafford in a really good spot. You got Drew Eubanks without possibly Nurkic. You got Walker Kessler without Lauri Markkanen. I mean, there's a bunch of guys today that you can like. Even PJ Washington you can throw into that spot, who could be in a pretty good role tonight. So center is a bit loaded, but Jakob Poeltl would be really interesting. I think he's interesting even if these guys are in. But he becomes a really, really, really good play if those guys are out. And it's against the Detroit Pistons, right? Anyone can score on them. We know big men can have their way with them. So I think he'd be a pretty good play. But Boucher would be my favorite value. And if Will Barton starts, listen, he's now 4.1K. I was skeptical at 3.1K. And I was just like, he's 3-1. Hopefully he won't burn me too much. I still ended up cashing that night. But Will Barton at 3-1 only get me 9 was very hurtful. Wasn't happy about that. And listen, there's just a lot of good values on this slate where I don't need to dabble in Will Barton, even if he's starting, but I could understand if you want to go back to the well, maybe go back to, the projection you had for him last game, if he starts and hope for the best. But you need all that lineup news to come in the correct way. And that's the key. We need to wait and see what that injury news is going to be.
Our guy Bobby Hare is in chat. Check out his article today. He's got his misprices and shippers article on the Run Pure Sports website. If you're not a member, code JTHayes15, get 15% off your first month's payment, and hit the like button so we can give you the plays of the day. C-Dome, the Pistons, much healthier than they've been, larger rotation, very difficult to predict, but they're playing the Raptors, who like to keep a condensed rotation and maybe a little shorthanded. What do you see here, Detroit at Toronto?
Yeah, with Toronto's rotation, it's pretty, cut and dry, usually, especially when they're healthy. I mean, if Trent and Barnes are out, it's going to give you decision-making on, how much exposure you want to have to these other guys like VanVleet, OG, and Siakam. I think OG is a great play tonight, to be honest with you. It's a great matchup for him. He's dual eligible. He's 6,400. Probably will play 35, 36 minutes, especially if Barnes isn't there and Trent. I mean, I think it gives it a little more opportunity, maybe shoot a couple more threes. So, for me, I think it would be a priority. Absolutely. Now, if these guys both play, I do like Gary Trent, 5,200. Great matchup. They really struggle against like shooting guards, small forwards. So you can consider him absolutely. Fred VanVleet, 8,700. I mean, the usage is just enormous with him. Great fantasy point per minute guy. Projection is there. I will say, though, I don't mind a Detroit guy or two for value. Now, I know we talked about Will Barton, 4,100. I agree with Mangone. It's just not a sexy play to me. He just doesn't pop really like in anything. One guy that does pop is RJ Hampton. Now, if you look, they're depleted at the guard position. Backup point guards really excel against Toronto. And so for me, when I look at that, he's 4,100. He's dual eligible, so it gives you a little bit more flexibility. Aside from that, 26 to 28 minutes at that price point? I know people will probably say it's gross to hear that, but there's a lot of upside there. If he gets you 25 to 30 fantasy points, at 4,100, which, he does pop up, especially in a lot of simulations and projections. So for me, I definitely will consider it. Absolutely. And if you think that this is going to be some type of blowout run, we got a 14.5 point spread. It only makes it even more appealing to have something like that. So just something to consider from the Detroit side, because I do not mind it whatsoever. I think also, too, you can consider Chris Boucher. It's another value play that people have gone to as of late. If these injuries are there and these guys don't play, gives it a bump to Boucher. And for me, I mean, this guy, absolutely great. Over a minute per fantasy point per minute guy. If he plays 20, 25 minutes, love it. It could be a great situation for him as well. So the injuries definitely got to stay into, got to look at it. The thing that is scary is the 14.5 point spread. But outside of that, I mean, with no Corey Joseph, no Magruder, no Diallo, it really just opens up the floodgates for RJ Hampton as a value piece. So definitely something to consider when you look at this matchup.
All right. Something else to consider, and I would consider it heavily right now, is really abusing the like button. I mean, 180 is not going to get the plays of the day, so let's go ahead and get that up. Don't just consider it. Actually, go ahead, smash it. Subscribe to that channel. We're heading towards 20,000 subscribers. The next game on the docket is going to be Houston at Memphis. This one starts at 8 o'clock Eastern. Memphis favored by 13 points, 233.5 total. For Houston, Frank Kaminsky is questionable. Jayshawn Tate is out on the Memphis side. The Williams brothers, Vince and Zaire, they are going to miss this game. Ja Morant is in. And C-Dome, we saw Ja Morant come back last game. He played off the bench, played mid-20s minutes. They said it was conditioning. Not sure if he's going to be off the bench again. It looks like they were going to do that for a couple of games. It gets really tough to play any of these guards or even the forwards here with this mix, with Morant coming off the bench, messing with that rotation. But Jaren Jackson Jr., maybe Xavier Tillman, who didn't do so well the other night. What are your thoughts here, Houston and Memphis?
All I got to say is it's a parade in my city, if you know what I mean. So Ja Morant, 8,900. The thing is this, even if he comes off the bench, this team can't play defense, Houston. Right now, it's looking like 28, 29 minutes. But Ja's a almost 1.6 fantasy point per minute guy. Like, there's upside here, especially if people are like not wanting to go to him yet. And let's just say he comes off the bench. But hey, I don't mind. I mean, he's 8,900. I mean, when have we seen Ja Morant in the 8K range? It's been quite some time. So I think you would have to consider it. They have the second highest implied total on the slate from Vegas standpoint of view. Once again, there's pieces here. So I think we consider Jaren Jackson. He's been smashing as of late, 8,200. Desmond Bain, 7,700. But I don't know if I would want to pay that for him. And then you also have the Houston guys who get a heavy doses of minutes. They put up a ton of shots. The volume's there. Jalen Green, obviously. Kevin Porter, Sengun. Do I want to go to like any value? I'm not necessarily sure, but for some reason, one guy does pop up at the center position is Usman Garuba. Now, he's projected, from what I'm seeing, like 18, 19 points. But for some reason, like he pops up a lot when you run the simulation. So I don't know if I'll go there. It is interesting, but it's just one thing to consider. And I'm not sure why he is popping so much. But I think, when you look at Memphis as a whole, they have a high implied Vegas total. Everyone right now is in the West has to win, like regardless, depending upon where you are in the seeding. They need some momentum because of what's been taking place as of late. So I don't mind going here. And like I said, I like to target Houston games because the lack of defense and the upside with the high scoring just leads to a lot of opportunity from fantasy production. So Ja Morant at 8,900, I definitely will consider and kind of look at this as a whole. But yeah, there's a lot of pieces here you can go to, and I don't mind it.
Travis, Houston, Memphis. Houston has been playing hard. The guards have been playing a ton of minutes. We've seen the same thing with Şengün here, though. That's probably why Garuba is popping a little bit, because the rotations have been a little bit wonky there in Houston, at least around the basket. What are your thoughts here, Houston, Memphis?
Yeah, I don't understand the Garuba thing, but I'll leave that to you guys. You guys can pay the rate with that one. I'm out on him. I can't do it. But for me, I don't like this game. Now, could you make a case that it could pop off, right? We saw it be competitive the other day. Yeah, I think you can, but the problem is some of the prices are up on KPJ and Jalen Green and these other guys. I just think it muddies up the situation a little bit too much. On top of that, the Memphis side, now you have Ja Morant, who's 8.9K. I mean, 8.9K for a guy that maybe gets max of 30 minutes because he's coming off the bench. Yes, it's a pretty good spot for the Rockets here, or playing against the Rockets. I totally understand that. But all in all, I think this is a game that I'm just going to fade. I understand. I think a Jaren Jackson Jr. or Desmond Bane could get the job done at their price tag, show that ceiling performance. Like, there's always these guys that are in this second tier. When we have unlimited value, right? There's always options in the second tier that they get a great matchup, like a Jaren Jackson Jr. or a Desmond Bane, that have the ceiling to get you that 50 DK points. And when they get you that 50, along with like these like values getting you 40, it just creates such a massive score for you. And that's how you get like just all these unlimited values crushing. And then sometimes you don't need those like raw points guys when you just have all these second tier players that absolutely crush. But for me, this is just a game that I'm kind of crossing off right now. If some news hits, yeah, I'll obviously circle back because it's a good pace up spot. But overall, I think I'm out on this game because we got some good plays that are coming up in this game. We had some good ones earlier, and we got some late value that's going to come, and we'll want the starting lineups for that. And I'll need a little bit of flexibility to figure that out. I'm not going to backload all my lineups for it, though, but I definitely want to have some flexibility tonight.
Yeah, and listen, Jaren Jackson Jr., 58, I think it was, DK points in this matchup just a couple of nights ago. But as we keep saying, Travis, and we've seen this play out, right? These back-to-backs, these two-game series, usually the guys who go off in the first game, a little bit lighter production in the second game, and it's other guys who take over the responsibilities. We'll see what happens there in Houston and Memphis. Next game, Charlotte, completely given up. Some injuries last night. Charlotte in Dallas. Dallas favored by 14.5 points. 227 total here for Charlotte. Cody Martin remains out. Terry Rozier is doubtful. Dennis Smith Jr., Mark Williams are probable. And Kelly Oubre is questionable after leaving that game last night. On the Dallas side, man, can't imagine that this is what Mark Cuban and the gang hoped for when they traded for Kyrie Irving, but this is what they've got. Tim Hardaway Jr. is questionable. Kyrie Irving is questionable. Luka is 12K on this slate where you can obviously fit him. Question is 14.5 point spread. The game is in Dallas. He's going to be playing against a bunch of guys that are on 10-day contracts and don't really see a lot of run here. Is he a priority for you, Travis?
Yeah. Now I'm not going to lie, JT. I thought you were going to someone else, but you're on the Charlotte and Dallas game, correct?
Charlotte, Dallas.
Yeah,
Yes,
the game of the night, you could argue, right? Like as crazy as it sounds. And back to the point I said at the start of the show, Washington is one of the spots to look at. Charlotte is one of the spots to look at. And then you have Portland later on, which is going to be a pretty big one as well. At least for me right now. Yes, some injury news can change that. Let's start with Charlotte, and let's start with your boy, Mr. Svi, JTHayes. I saw you tweet about him the other night. You know, he had a big night, dropped 15 points, and was it 2 rebounds? And
15 points was a huge night, and my tweet was simply, welcome to March Madness. When the Charlotte Hornets put out Svi as their player of the game, you know it's March. You know it's March, baby.
Yeah, I mean, he played 30 minutes. So this is the thing I'm trying to figure out with this team tonight. For one, let's just kick Dallas out real quick. Luka's a really good spend because we have a bunch of value, right? Just a raw points play, really good matchup, can absolutely smash. If the game's competitive, if you tell me this game is going to be a tight game, I want Luka on my teams. It's just plain and simple. Now, Jaden Hardy, I think you could make a case for. I mean, the dude played 25 minutes the other night and had 41 DK points, and I think he's in a really nice role if Kyrie happens to be out. But that's a bit of a contrarian play, a little bit off the board, not a projection type play. It could be an interesting run back option that you might want to include for a cheaper price than a Luka, right? Now, we talk about Charlotte, because again, Charlotte is going to be a very big talking point on this slate. We have some big news in this game. Kelly Oubre, he's questionable. I'm expecting him to be out. Terry Rozier, doubtful. I'm expecting him to be out. We got Dennis Smith Jr., who is dealing with an illness. He's probable. Mark Williams, he's back. So what does that do to Nick Richards? Do they keep Mark Williams off the bench? Do they start Mark Williams? That'll be an interesting thing to see with the starting lineup there. I think that both those guys could be fine in this matchup, but not priority plays. No one I'm dying to get to. Because again, I think center's kind of loaded enough where I don't need to be playing those guys here. I really want to look at the forwards and the guards. The big one I'm trying to figure out is what do we do with PJ Washington? I kind of talked with Big T about this the other day. I was kind of kicking myself because I played some PJ Washington on Monday night. And I said, this guy just like always pops in projections. Always pops, looks good. And typically I don't play him that much, but I think that was the night I MME'd a little bit more, right? And I think I just fell on him on a last piece on one of my teams. I just do not think I'm dying to get the PJ Washington. You can make a case. There's a lot of ways this could fail for PJ Washington, right? If they do not get enough, let's say they're not close enough in the game, they could easily mail it in and bring in JT4 at the 4 more and not really play him a ton. So that's one thing that could happen. 2, yes, he's got a really good price tag at 5.9, but he doesn't have to do a lot at the price to be like an optimal play. Now, the question is, who is the starting point guard going to be for that team tonight? If it's Dennis Smith Jr., he soaks up a lot of usage, right? What if they happen to punt the game completely? Like we talked about yesterday on the show, JT, what if they punt and James Bouknight gets the keys to the car tonight? There's definitely a chance that happens. And if that happens, he is definitely a type of guy that needs a lot of usage in his hands and can muddy up a situation. And also, he's bad defensively and from the G League, and they can just be down so much early that, again, PJ's minutes get cut in the third. So there are routes where PJ does fail. So I'm trying to consider, how do I really handle him tonight? He's someone I might lower his projection a bit and be under the field. I might still get exposure just because there might be a little bit of fear of fading him. But I do think he's a really interesting idea to consider as a fade candidate today. That's not an easy one to pull the trigger on for sure. So that's kind of my take on him. Depends who's starting is going to be key. Like Svi is a really great example of it. Svi, I think, is one of these guys. If he's a starter tonight, well, I know he was the player of the night, JT, but we know he is just a spot-up corner shooter, right? And if that's the case and he's going to play a lot of minutes next to PJ Washington, well, that's going to be good for him. And the other usage guys that he's playing next to. I see Svi as one of the guys that when he's in the game, I like some of the other ball handlers that are going to be there. Like maybe Dennis Smith Jr. would be in a bit better scenario. Also, you can make the case that Svi, if he starts, well, he's in play because he's probably going to play 30 minutes and he's at a really cheap price tag, right? That's one reason why he's popped up a little bit today. So if he's going to be a starter here at 3K, who's also guard and forward eligible, that could be intriguing. But again, this starting lineup is going to dictate a lot, and being able to have that flexibility is going to be important. Being in the Discord chat. I mean, a lot of people on a Friday night, right? They're going out, they're doing something, maybe with their lady, maybe they're going out with the boys. It's just going to be a little bit tougher to make adjustments on a Friday. And you might see some people sleeping if we get a bit of a different lineup here. So that Charlotte news is going to be big. We'll be in the Discord chat breaking it down. We'll be updating all the content. It's hard to really digest what to do with Charlotte, but those are some of the takes I have right now without all the information.
Yeah, and my lean on Charlotte here is if there's a value guy at 3K or 3,100 in the starting lineup, then I'd be okay with them. Not going to play the likes of Hayward, Oubre if he's back. Not going to touch Dennis Smith Jr. Butthole Jenkins is talking about DSJ revenge. He would have to have a revenge on like 13 teams in the league. So I just don't see it. And then we did get the Spurs news here. Zach Collins and Devin Vassell are out. Keldon Johnson, Trey Jones, Doug McDermott, and Devontae Graham are in. Sedome, thoughts here, Charlotte, Dallas on this slate?
Yeah, I mean, Luka, obviously, of the spends, is one of the greatest tonight and great upside. It's hard for me to ignore that. If Kyrie's out, I mean, it just makes it even more appealing. I think what's interesting is, one, what's going to happen with Mark Williams? Does he play? If not, just to get a little bit different, from a value perspective, like on a point per dollar, Nick Richards definitely can be looked at 5,100. I think he was chalk last night, if I'm not mistaken, or the night before. Just didn't exceed expectations, but I don't mind it, especially on this large of a slate. Same thing goes for Christian Wood, believe it or not. I mean, of this game, like he has like the best matchup, like on an ADVP situation. He's averaging, almost 1.3 fantasy points per minute. he should tear them up inside. Shouldn't have any issue whatsoever. Between, to be honest with you, like if you're playing 20 or 150 and you're looking to get different, I mean, these two big men are definitely something that I would consider. Gordon Hayward and PJ Washington are definitely interesting. Like the minutes will be there, but and they do have some upside. Like absolutely. I just don't know what this team looks like, especially now with where they're going and the guys that are doubtful. And it's like you guys were saying, like what are they really going to throw out? It would be hard to fade Dennis Smith if he does play. And I say that because let's just say he plays 33, 34 minutes. Like he averages basically almost a fantasy point per minute. When you look at Bryce McGowan's, this guy is like 0.59, 0.6 fantasy points per minute. I know he's 3,100, but it just doesn't seem like, the type of usage between the two. If I had to distinguish it, I would just feel a lot better going with Dennis Smith. So that's an interesting thing to look out for, especially if Bryce McGowan starts. I'm sure, people will rack up on him, but is this the best situation for Charlotte too? Dallas plays great at home. Like they're a different team when they're at home. They also play good defensively at home. I know Dallas has been a little bit of a train wreck as of late, but it is a game that's interesting because injuries and everything that can be provided to you here, I get it. But I will say, like, I think, like, obviously Luka, it's hard to say no to him, especially kind of the upside if Kyrie's out. And Christian Wood, I think I'm definitely going to consider. I don't think anyone would go there, nor would they pay 6,900. But, he does have tremendous upside here. So outside of that, though, I think that's it for me. I'm going to avoid the ancillary pieces of Dallas. It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, people are talking about Svi. I mean, listen, I get the price. I get the fact that he's going to play minutes, but we'll have to look. My viewpoint is, man, if he's going to be popular, I think there's plenty of other places to go, plenty of ways to pivot on this slate. Next game, Milwaukee kind of locked in, pretty much locked in to their playoff spot. You can see that they're resting a bunch of people. They're at Utah, favored by 9.5, a 236.5 total. Jay Crowder, Goran Dragic, Myers Leonard, Chris Middleton are all out for this team. For Utah, big news here, Jordan Clarkson and Lauri Markkanen are out. Colin Sexton remains out. Rudy Gay will miss another game. And Johnny Juzang, a guy who I wasn't looking to roster ever at any point, but he's questionable. So we'll see what happens with Johnny Juzang. C-Dome, Milwaukee at Utah.
You know what school Johnny Juzang went to?
Would it be your high school?
No, he went to UCLA.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. I just say that because Gonzaga played UCLA last night. Yeah, here, I mean, God, I don't know if I really like this game. It's interesting because when you look at the Hornets and Bucks game, like these two are probably, they scare me a little bit the most. With them being depleted, especially with no Lauri and Clarkson, I mean, the question is like, I don't think anyone's going to want to pay $7,200 for a dual eligible Talen Horton-Tucker. He was sexy weeks ago, but I think that play has kind of come to an end. It's fizzled out. Obviously Giannis, spend up, but if I had to compare the spend up between him and Doncic, I'm going Luka all day, probably almost every single time if I had to make that decision. Outside of that, though, I think, what's interesting is they're going to have to get scoring from somewhere, Utah. Chris Dunn's been playing absolutely incredible off the bench. 5,500, great usage. With Lauri on the floor or Lauri playing, he's at a 26% usage rate. Without Lauri, it becomes over 30. So at 5,500, especially if this is somewhat a blowout, he is probably one of the best plays that you could go to as far as Utah is concerned when you look at the data. So I think I could consider him if I wanted to. But outside of that, man, like I just don't think from a GBP perspective, there's many places I want to go. Simone Fecchio. He's projected for like 32, 33 minutes. He's 4,400, but I think you're being heavily reliant on the three and him making those threes. So, and then you also need him to rebound. So I think it's just hard at 4,400 to exceed expectations. But outside of that, man, I think it's a no-go for me. I'm not liking it as much as maybe, some quite other games that we talked about, especially with Vassell and Collins being out. That kind of opens up a lot too now from the Spurs.
Fair enough, guys. Hit the like button. 221 out of 491 is not going to get it done today. So go ahead and keep that up. We've got just a couple of games to get through here. We did get some Pacers news. Tyrese Halliburton will play. Chris Duarte has been ruled out. So we'll get some thoughts on that here in just a minute. But the next game, some big news here. Philadelphia pretty much locked into their spot as well. And you can see, obviously, they got up big against the Bulls the other night. Hurt a bunch of us, myself included. when Joel Embiid did not return and play even a single second in the second half against the Bulls. Philly in Golden State. Warriors favored by 5.5. Gary Payton remains out for the Warriors. For the 76ers, Joel Embiid is questionable. James Harden is questionable. Jalen McDaniels is questionable. Embiid did go through shoot-around. James Harden did not go through shoot-around. So, Cedome, Philly in San Francisco to take on the Warriors. What do you see here?
You didn't want Mangone to talk about the Bucks?
Fair point.
I thought you talked about them.
No, I didn't talk about the Bucks.
My bad. I'm skipping. Talk to us, sweet Travis, about your thoughts about Tyrese Halliburton being ruled in, and then about Utah and the Bucks.
Well, you'll like this, JT. Tyrese Halliburton's probably playing because it's Miles Turner's birthday today. So, the old birthday there.
Of course.
Yeah, that's why he's playing. But and Duarte's out. I do think the Spurs news is going to be interesting. Like, I'm not going to bite, I think, as much on this news, but it'll definitely start popping some players in there and start tempting you. I'll at least say that. But
Keldon Johnson is going to pop. And listen, I mean, my viewpoint on most slates is if Keldon Johnson beats me, he beats me.
I agree.
On a 10-game slate, my viewpoint is definitely if Keldon Johnson as the only main piece, I mean, you do have Trey Jones in there, right? So it's not like it's just Keldon. Sure, Washington will give up a bunch of points and things like that, but if he beats me on this slate, I think he beats me.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. The only I want to see what Sandro's projection is because he is a pretty elite producer. But 4-8 is starting to get to that tag where you definitely can't bust, right? So, but this is a pretty good game here. The Bucks have some interesting plays. Like for one, let's start with Giannis. It's just raw points play that like we have a lot of value, so you can easily get him into your lineups. He could easily dominate the Jazz. Any stud against the Jazz makes sense. Second, let's go with any guard against the Utah Jazz is absolutely crushed. How about Drew Holiday at 7,200? I mean, Drew Holiday is at that price where you just go, that's too cheap for Drew Holiday, right? And you start getting suckered in. Combine that with Chris Middleton being out and the stone matchup against Utah. I think I'm kind of interested in that. Now, the Utah side, the way I'm kind of handling them is I think there are some good plays on here. I thought you guys brought up a good point with Talon Horton-Tucker. I don't think we want to play him on DK, but I'll call out. And the chat will love this, JT. You know, they're always asking for FanDuel plays. I mean, Talon Horton-Tucker is 5.5K on FanDuel. Like, that's too cheap over there, right? So that's a simple price shopping thing that you can do. I have interest in him over there. I do not have as much interest over on DraftKings for sure. But there are good Utah plays that I think we should consider. For instance, the Bucks have been really, really poor against big man. So Walker Kessler, I think at 6'7", is definitely in the conversation for me. I think Kelly Olynyk at 6.6K, he has the upside if the game's competitive. Problem is, what if that game's not competitive? One rule I think you could set is if you play Kelly Olynyk, then make sure you play Drew Holiday or Giannis as a run back. Not that you're saying when you play Giannis or Drew, you have a run back with Kelly Olynyk, but it's just if you play Olynyk, then have the run back. Because what happens is if this game's a blowout, Kelly Olynyk is not playing. He's one of the first guys off the court. So that's how I would handle Kelly Olynyk if I happen to play him tonight. Chris Dunn, 5.5K. I think he's in the conversation. But again, you got to start thinking about it. Do you play Chris Dunn or do you play Monte Morris for like 600, 700 cheaper? Do you want to even wait on that? I don't know what to do with Chris Dunn. I think he's a fine play. He's one that feels like kind of like a sprinkle play. Maybe I'll get a small exposure to my MME, but not too much. Simone Fontecchio, our boy Kevin K. Falix guy, 4.4K. It is a good price, and he is blowout proof at that small forward, power forward position. Again, another guy that I might sprinkle in there on some teams because some of these guys are popping up a little bit. I don't think they're bad plays, but they're also not priority values, right? When I ranked out the plays earlier on, like Washington's obviously one good ones, Charlotte, Portland, you obviously didn't hear me mention Utah. These guys are secondary plays, but they're not bad plays, right? They're on that kind of tier 2, and they're going to come in at lower ownership because of it. So that's how I handle them, and I really do like Drew Holiday. I think Drew Holiday ends up being a pretty popular point guard on this slate, but for good reasons because he's just too cheap, and the matchup is just absolutely elite.
All right, 229, 502 watching. We need at least 300. We need 300 likes to get to the plays of the day. 10-game slate, lots of potential traps. You want these plays of the day. So go ahead and abuse that like button. Travis will go ahead and stick with you now and go Philadelphia at Golden State. A little bit tougher to break down without this Philadelphia news, but Golden State, not even much better at home. They're a completely different team at home. as opposed to what they are on the road. Thoughts here, Philly at Golden State.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I'll call out is there are interesting price tags on the Golden State side. For one, Steph Curry 9.7 is too cheap, right? It's just plain and simple. If he goes for a nuke game at no ownership, he can go for a nuke game at no ownership. Klay Thompson, too, at 6.7 is kind of popping a little bit, and I'm kind of interested just because of what his ceiling is. Again, one of those guys that just has the ceiling to get you 40 to 50 DK points. I take note of those players. There's some guys in this 6K range that I don't feel like I have the ability to. He is one of those guys that has that ability in this matchup. James Harden likely is going to sit. He didn't participate in shooting around, and Joel Embiid did. Obviously, they're pushing for playoffs. It sounds like that Achilles is a little more serious. Obviously, a good spot for Joel Embiid as a spend. The question is, how do you handle the other three pieces? Tyrese Maxey at 7K, DeAnthony Melton, he comes in at 6K, and then Tobias Harris, I believe he's 6'2 or 6'4. For me, Tobias Harris had a great game the other day. Only shot 5 for 9. The shot attempts weren't great, but he ran into the rebounds and assists. I just don't buy that. And I think overall, I'd rather play Melton or I'd rather play Tyrese Maxey. They both have really good roles. The one thing you could argue is at least Melton's get that forward eligibility. So that's kind of helpful there for him. If you feel like you need to roster him in that forward spot instead of going to a Maxey, I could see that argument being made. But I think those are the two plays that I like the most. And Embiid's definitely my favorite in this game. Then it's probably Melton number 2, Maxey number 3, but those are pretty close. Tobias Harris is a distant number 4. And then on that Warrior side, like I said, it's either Curry for a contrarian spend up, but I don't see myself getting there with that. One thing that I personally struggle with sometimes is I pride myself in having pretty good roster construction at times, and I really like to get different up top with my studs. And it's a 10-game slate, and we have some studs that could be in incredible spots, right? Kristaps Porzingis in a really good spot. Embiid could be in a really good spot injury-wise because we might not have James Harden. Giannis in a really good spot. So where am I going to get different? I might have to get different down low instead if I eat some of those studs as more chalky plays. So that's one thing that I have to decide is, if Embiid comes in with some higher ownership, am I okay with that? And how am I going to mix that in with my full lineup? Because that's one thing sometimes I look at the end of the night and I struggle with. I'm like, I played too much chalk down low and too much up top. I didn't find a differentiation piece. So that's one kind of thing that I'm going to be thinking about when building out my lineups a little bit tonight. Yes, it's a 10-game slate. I don't think we have to worry about ownership too much, but I do like to have like 5% like absolute gems that no one's on that can help carry me to the top of the leaderboard.
Speaking of 5% gems, if you're not a member, use code JTHayes15 and get in on Bobby's Misprices and Shippers article. That's where he talks about some of those 5% owned gems as well. Our guy Bobby Hare. Don't use his code, though. It doesn't work. Cedome, Philly at Golden State. Thoughts here on this game before we get the news?
Yeah, I mean, great total. Embiid, when it comes to like Luka, Embiid, Giannis, I really think Embiid and Luka kind of have the best situation tonight, or the most upside, I would say. Tyrese Maxey is very interesting. They struggle against combo guards, and this guy gets a heavy dosage of minutes, great usage. For me, like when I look at it, I don't know how many people are willing to pay 7K for Maxey, but he does have upside, and I don't mind it whatsoever. So if you want to get sneaky and try to find like some piece from this game that, to be honest, we could go back and forth. You're right, though, JT. Like Golden State is a completely different beast at home. But the one area where they do lack is they struggle against guards. And so, I don't know if Harden plays. If Harden plays, I mean, it makes Maxey even more appealing. But I could also consider Harden as well at 9,500. So, when I look at the matchup, I kind of want to focus on, outside of Embiid, I want to focus on the guard play. I agree with Mangone on Tobias. Like 6,200 now is getting a little bit too pricey. I don't think I would want to go there. One interesting piece, same thing with Melton. Melton's 6K, so they're becoming a little bit more expensive than they were a few games ago, and so it's more difficult to swallow. I saw people talking about Jordan Poole, 5,600, dual eligible. It just, he just doesn't have the upside like maybe earlier in the year when Steph was off the floor and he was starting and stuff, and so it's just different now. And obviously, you can see the rotation's a little bit tighter because they're needing to win. And so who gets more minutes? That goes to Klay and Steph, right? Splash Brothers, it just makes sense. So for me, I think I might have to go no to that, even though that price point is appealing. But on the contrary, Klay, 6,700, dual eligible, play 34, 35 minutes. I don't mind it. Same thing, with Steph, if you want to go there, even though Steph hasn't been, fantasy Steph, since he's been back on and off. The inconsistency there, if I had to choose between the two, between Steph and Harden, I'd probably go Harden just because of the matchup and how I like that. But one guy that is interesting, And this is like in that rotation of centers is Kevon Looney. He's been playing really good as of late. He's 5,200. The reason why I say that is because not only is he kind of popping, I mean, he's averaging 1.2 fantasy points per minute, but I think he's going to need to play a little bit extra with the lack of depth. If he doesn't get into foul trouble, he's going to have to be on the floor more, especially with Embiid on there. So it is interesting. And I know people kind of might question that, but I will say, like, from what I've seen from production wise in him, 5,200, he's been producing. So for me, he is popping just in some projections. So for me, I would have to consider it. And that's probably like on once again, a 20, 150 team thing. But if you're looking to kind of rotate those centers that we've talked about, I don't mind throwing Looney into the pool. And if he shows up, he shows up. If he doesn't, I totally get it. So outside of that, though, the value plays no go for me. That's pretty much it, man.
All right. We got some news here on the Toronto guys. Precious Achiuwa is ruled out. Gary Trent is ruled out, and Scotty Barnes is ruled out. Will Barton will once again start and probably present the biggest trap of the slate one more time. We'll go ahead and move on. Next game, Phoenix at Sacramento. Sacramento favored by 3.5, a 239.5 total. Big news here, of course, for Phoenix. DeAndre Ayton is going to miss another game. Kevin Durant remains out, and Kevin Huerter will play for the Sacramento Kings. C-Dome Phoenix at Sacramento.
Yeah, obviously without Ayton, it even increases Booker's usage a little bit more. With Ayton, it's like at a 35 usage rate. Without him, I mean, we're talking close to 40 now. So for me, he's going to play 36, 37 minutes. It's a great matchup. They struggle. Once again, another team that struggles against like combo guards. And this is a situation where both these teams need to win right now, especially Sacramento. They've lost the last 2 or last 3, if I'm not mistaken. I know they came off a big road trip, but they look a little bit different these last couple games. They've struggled. I'm sure this is also a game where, it's going to be highly competitive against one another. Sabonis without Ayton, I mean, this should be a great spot for him to smash. The question is, do we pay the 10.1K? What does his ownership look like? But him and Booker are the two plays that if you're looking for, kind of that huge upside, I love both of them tonight. And, you can fit them around in different lineup construction. So I don't mind that whatsoever. Chris Paul, I think I'm okay with. I think we're starting to see the fatigue and kind of what the season's taking a toll on him as far as production, and more importantly, as far as he gets deeper into the season, it's just a different version of Chris Paul. And for fantasy production, it's not somewhere I want to go. Outside of that, though, man, I'm going to be honest with you, I don't really see anything that's kind of popping. But I will say, Devin Booker and Sabonis are probably two priorities that I'm going to consider and look at when it comes to finishing out these lineups.
All right. Hit the like button. 51 likes to get the plays of the day. Brandon Mays, yes, there is a promo discount to sign up. Thank you for asking. It's JTHayes 15. You will get 15% off of your first month's payment. So go ahead and hop over to Run Pure Sports right now and sign up so you can get all the core plays, the flow chart, the heat map, and Big T's player pool tonight. Travis, thoughts here, Sacramento and Phoenix?
Yeah, we're going to keep it real simple here. It's just there's no values here that I absolutely like, especially with Kevin Huerter coming back. But De'Aaron Fox is underpriced at 8.3, and it's going to be a competitive game. I think he's in the conversation. I think you make the case without DeAndre Ayton. On top of that, no Kevin Durant, right? There's a lot of usage to go around. So Chris Paul at 7.5 in the conversation too. Devin Booker, really good play, I think, at 9.6K. Just the problem is he's a very points-dependent player, right? So are you willing to ride that out, right? He typically isn't like this triple-double guy, so you need to get it in points. And, hey, it's a good pace spot, so I do think it makes some sense. Not a bad idea to maybe do like a run back together, like a Domantas Sabonis or a De'Aaron Fox to spend up at. So that's overall how I'm handling this game. It's mainly the studs.
All right. Next game, Chicago at Portland. Chicago favored by 4.5, 222 implied total here. And of course, the news is pretty big in this game for Chicago. Alex Caruso went through shoot around. He's questionable. Javonte Green is questionable. DeMar DeRozan, however, has been ruled out. Again, this is a must win for Chicago, more so than Portland, who looks like perhaps they're starting to mail this in and shut things down. Yusuf Nurkic is doubtful, midday downgrade. Damian Lillard is a midday downgrade to questionable. Nasir Little is probable, and Anthony Simons and Justin Winslow remain out as well. Travis, we'll stay with you. Chicago at Portland.
Yeah, this is a really good game to talk about. Late night hammer for sure. DeMar DeRozan, he is out, which is going to help mainly this. I mean, not mainly the studs, but I think it does help Levine. It does help Vucevic, right? Because typically when you have three of them in there, right? Three's a crowd, and it's been a crowd there for those three there. And it's a pretty good spot against Portland. So Zach LaVine, guard and forward eligible, like him. Vucevic, interesting contrarian spend, but again, I think center's too loaded that I probably won't go there. I'd prefer Levine if I had to pick one. Alex Caruso is popping up. I'm trying to decide what to do with Alex Caruso here. Again, Alex Caruso's fine, but it's just not someone that I'm going to prioritize in my lineups, right? Good values all around. I think he's fine. Patrick Williams kind of feels similar. Portland's the really interesting one because the most expensive guy on their team, if these guys sit, and currently I see, some places aren't even projecting Dame to be out, right? He's questionable. Nurkic is questionable, but I'm expecting them to be out. And if those guys are out, all the adjustments you're going to have made. If you got this news at 6:59 p.m., you'd be able to make all the adjustments, or it's like 6:30, you'd be able to make all the adjustments and figure it out and move on. But people might be locked out of roster spots because we got these good Raptors plays. We got the Charlotte ones. We got Washington. There's a bunch of good ones that we have. Trenton Watford at 6K, I think he's a pretty good option. Shannon Sharp might be able to play a ton of minutes tonight, 5.4K. Cam Reddish, 4.6, will likely be in a really good usage role. Matisse Thybulle should see a pile of minutes. Drew Eubanks at 3.4 could be a really interesting center option. I mean, Portland has some pretty good competent players in this matchup that you can't ignore. So I think Portland is going to have an opportunity for value. You just have to kind of create an attack plan of how you want to handle it because there are some really good value plays that are going to lock earlier.
C-Dome, big news here, obviously, to come. Chicago in Portland.
Man, when I look at the high price guys, for Lillard, even if he does play, it's easier for me to kind of like say no to him as compared to like Luka or Embiid. So of those high price guys, like he kind of fizzles out to the lower tier when I rate those. So for me, I probably would shy away from Lillard. I do like the Trenton Watford call. The minutes are going to be there. This guy's been performing at a high level. And I think without Nurkic, what we'll see is I am worried about you. I saw people talking about Eubanks. I am worried about Eubanks in the foul trouble. It happens quite often. And I think Vooch can give him a little bit of a tough situation. So I wouldn't be surprised if Watford does also slide in and play some of those big man minutes as well. Which, if that's the case, I mean, as we know, Chicago kind of struggles against big men. So I do like the Watford call. He does pop. He does look good. One thing's interesting. I know Mangone said Caruso's popping. I don't mind also looking at Patrick Beverley. Dual eligible. Patrick Beverley, 0.82 fantasy points per minute. He's going to play, 33, 34 minutes. Especially if Lillard's out. I know it sounds gross, but when we're talking about like Monte Morris and other guards that are in the same price range, no one's going to go Beverly. But, if you're doing 20, 150 lineups, you could sprinkle him. So I don't mind it. It's easy for me to stay away from the Chicago guys. I just have no interest there. And outside of that, I think if Lillard doesn't play, maybe some sprinkle of Shaedon Sharp, just because he'll shoot a ton. The usage will be there. But I think of the Portland guys, I think Trenton Watford by far probably looks the best and, sets up nicely tonight.
It's going to be an interesting couple of weeks, I think, for Shaedon Sharp and Cam Reddish here coming up. Certainly those guys going to have, as you both mentioned, a ton of usage and a lot of playmaking opportunity for Shaedon Sharp, even at a little bit of an elevated price tag. Go ahead. 42 more likes to go. Listen, we're on a schedule. We got to get you up and out of here for Up to Lock. So we are not going to waste time. If you get the 42 likes in this last game, you get the plays of the day. If not, we're putting them in Discord for the subscribers only. So that means if you're not a member, you would have to go ahead and use code JTHayes15 to sign up and get in there to find the plays of the day. If you don't abuse the like button right now. C-Dome, stick with you for the final game of the night. Oklahoma City, the Thunder at the Lakers. Lakers favored by 5.5, 230.5 implied total for the Lakers. We know this every day now. Anthony Davis has taken the mantle over from LeBron James. He is likely going to play for the Oklahoma City Thunder. And D'Angelo Russell is questionable as well for the Lakers. For the Thunder, midday downgrade for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. There was some reporting by beat reporters over the last day and a half that Mark Daniel had said, hey, we feel a little bit more comfortable with Shai on back-to-backs, but not so fast, given that midday downgrade. And then Aleksej Pokusevski, Poku, back in our lives here. He is going to be active for this game. Anything you like here, the Thunder at the Lakers?
Yeah, I don't know how many minutes Poku gets, but I mean, min price, center position. Maybe if power forward, if you wanted to take a stab, I mean, he'll probably play like 12, 14 minutes. I don't think I want to go there. I think A. Davis pops up extremely. I mean, great value tonight. He should smash here. He's one of those high price guys that I do like, especially in the late night hammer. He should excel here. And also too, let's not forget, this is a huge playoff implication game. Believe it or not, late in the season, who knew that we would be talking about how the Lakers is in like a must win against OKC. Regardless of how you view it, they have to win this game, especially with what's going on right now in the West. So if SGA sits, then obviously Lakers are even more better shape to take this. So I mean, I'm curious to see if SGA plays or not, considering the playoff implications. But also don't mind Austin Reeves at 6.8K. I know that probably sounds wild to hear that, but it's a great matchup for him. He's also dual eligible. You're looking at possibly 35, 36 minutes. If it's competitive and stays close, could even see a couple more minutes in there. Over fantasy point per minute guy. But he does pop. I mean, he does give great value tonight, even though he's 6.8K, considering what he's done as of late. People might say, well, it's a certain sample size. Well, I got to tell you, look at over the last 10, 15 games. Absolutely incredible. The consistency's there. So I don't mind paying that price point of 6.8K. If SGA's out, I could see a lot of people going to Giddey. I don't know if that's necessarily what I want to do in this scenario, but I get it and I understand it. Jalen Williams is now down to 6,800. Heavy dosage of minutes, great defensively as well. 34, 35 minute guy. There are pieces here where, you could play in regards to late night hammer, and I don't mind, and he's one of them. Outside of that, though, looking at the rest, probably a no-go on everything else. Outside, maybe some Dort. He's 5,600. He's only small forward eligible, though, so that kind of takes away the flexibility that you could use with him. But, I mean, another guy that is relatively cheap should see 30-plus minutes, if I'm not mistaken. So if this game does stay competitive, like I mentioned, these guys can definitely excel tonight. And I got to say, like, A. Davis is definitely on my radar. So, but that's it for me from this game.
Sweet Travis, last game of the night, Oklahoma City at the Lakers. Still some news to come. What do you see here?
Yeah, I mean, if D-Russ doesn't play, I understand the Reeves thing, but I don't think I'm going to get there as much today. I don't think I'm going to get to – I mean, Anthony Davis, like, you could make a case. He could become a good – like an even better play with that news. And then SGA, I just don't want to mess with the Thunder, right? I just think there's so many good plays on this slate. Am I going to backload and, like, try to figure out what's going to happen and how the chips are all going to fall in this game? No, I'm not going to backload for it. So for me, it's kind of Anthony Davis or bust, and I'm just kind of trying my best to stay away from this game.
All right, Anthony Davis or bust there in the late game. 284, we didn't get there, and I think you guys have been conditioned that, we'll just give you a couple of minutes. Not going to happen tonight. So Brandon Mays, thank you for signing up. Anyone else who's not a member, you're going to have to go ahead and use code JTHayes15 to get in our Discord, get 15% off your first month's payment, because there are no plays of the day. They're going into the Discord. For C-Dome, for Sweet Travis, I'm JT Hayes Jr. Maybe we'll get back to the plays of the day next week.